The launch models, the things that you see the people with, multiple 7 and 8 figure businesses that they're doing and is working, is not necessarily the business plan, the launches, the et cetera, that you should be using as, say, a 5 or 6 figure business. Because there are different advantages. There are different things and reasons why things work at different levels of your business. And again, you're going to hear that and say, man, this seems so complicated. And it is. Welcome to the Certified Badass Online Marketing Podcast, where being a badass has less to do with what you wear and what music you listen to, and everything to do with whether you've got the thriving online business of your dreams. I'm your renegade thinking Harvard Law grad turned online entrepreneur host, Bobby Klink. In my years building my thriving business, the most important lesson I've learned is that being a badass online marketer isn't about secret strategies or ninja tactics. It's about doing the basic stuff right and showing the F up. So each week here on the show, you'll get clear, easy to execute guidance on how to build your online business and a swift kick in the ass or two to make sure you're getting it done. Hey there, welcome to episode 173 of the Certified Badass Online Marketing Podcast. I'm your host, Bobby Klink, and I'm excited for today's episode because today's episode is one of those times that I get to give you some bad news, but some good news to go with it. And when I say bad news, I don't really like being the bearer of bad news, but I like to actually give you the reality and to help wake entrepreneurs up. And in today's episode, we're going to do that. Specifically, today, we're going to be talking about the fact that there is no instruction manual for entrepreneurship. This episode is kind of inspired by the fact that as I'm recording this, I have a new desk that should be here later today. And I was thinking about it. I'm going to have to put it together. And there's going to be an instruction manual. And there's going to be this sense that literally, if I just pull out the pieces, lay them out as the instructions tell me to do, follow the steps, step 1 to however many it is. I don't know if it's 157 or whatever, but if I just follow the steps in order and do exactly what they tell me to do, I will have a desk at the end of it. I will have a successful conclusion. And I was thinking about the fact that that actually doesn't exist for entrepreneurship. And I say that it was inspired by that. In reality, it was inspired by something different. It was inspired by a comment, or this episode was inspired by a comment or a question that I saw, a post in a Facebook group of entrepreneurs. And the gist of the post was this. It was a woman who said, I've got my health habits nailed down. I run so many miles a day. I row so many kilometers a week. I drink this many ounces of water. And it was like things like that, like habits, practices. And she said, and I know that if I do those things, I will have good health. I'm looking for feedback from you folks, you other entrepreneurs, on what are the business things, the habits that I can do where I can control it. I can say, I take these steps, I do these actions, and it will inevitably lead to my success. And so I saw this question or this comment, this post. It wasn't someone I knew. I thought about commenting, but then I said, no, I'm not going to. Because what I was going to have to say in that response was, there aren't any. And that's what today's episode is going to be about. I'm going to walk through why it is that you can't expect that someone, me or anyone else, can simply say, here are the 10 steps to success. And if you follow these 10 steps, you are guaranteed to get good results. Or even if they don't use the words guarantee, they kind of imply that. It doesn't exist. And you should stop searching for that. So that's what today's episode is about. Now, before we get to the content, and by the way, this is going to sound like a really weird shift. This episode is brought to you by my friend Amy Porterfield's free masterclass, which is happening tomorrow, which is all about how to create a profitable digital course from scratch. Now, you may be sitting here saying, but Bobby, you just told me there's no instruction manual. And I did. And I'm going to stand by that. And what I'm going to tell you is I can't guarantee you that if you go and watch Amy's masterclass and follow her guidance, and if you then ultimately decide to sign up for her course, Digital Course Academy, and follow that guidance every time, step by step, that I can tell you 100% without fail, you're going to have a successful course in 3 months, 6 months, whatever. I can't make you that promise. And I'm not going to make you that promise. But what I can tell you is that once you decide on the course you want to take, whether it's a course, and by course, I mean the path you want to take, whether it's creating a course, creating a membership, creating a service industry, whatever it is that you decide is how you're going to build your business, it's good to get some insight and some guidance from people who've done it before. You're going to be more likely to succeed if you follow someone's path, but there's still no guarantees. And I want to be clear on that because I don't want you to feel like I am all over the place. I'm being consistent here. And so if you're thinking about creating an online course, I would tell you shouldn't do it without going and attending my friend Amy's masterclass. You can sign up for it at bobbyklink.com/Amy Masterclass, bobbyklink.com/Amy Masterclass. You can get all the details. You can get her insights on building an online course, and then you can make the decision about what to do. Now, with that, I want to dive into today's episode. And I want to start with a broad concept that I want to make sure that everyone gets. Because a lot of this, like looking for guidance, looking for step-by-step advice, comes from us seeing gurus in the space who have had success, right? We see the people who've succeeded in building a business like the business we want to build for ourselves. So we say, okay, tell me what you did step by step so I can follow those steps. There's a couple of problems there. And the problem, first of all, is that there's what's called survivor's bias. If you don't know what survivor's bias is, it's the concept generally that we're only seeing the people who succeeded. And what I mean by that is very simply this. You're not seeing the gurus who maybe followed the same general steps but failed, because those people aren't out talking about it. They're not out yelling from the rooftops about their failure. Well, me is an exception. I do that quite frequently. But most people, when they fail, either they go back and they get a job, so they're no longer in the space, so you're not hearing from them, or they pivot, do something else, and so they're not talking about what they tried that didn't work. And so you're only hearing from the people who've succeeded among gurus, for the most part. And so what then happens is that when you've heard from those people who have had success, you're going to then say, oh, well, it seems inevitable. Because they're going to tell you what worked for them, how they built their business. And you're going to say, oh, well, if it worked for them, it's going to have to work for me. But that is survivor's bias at its worst, because you're simply making what's called a logical, you're buying into a logical fallacy here. You're making a leap that doesn't exist. You're taking correlation and assuming causation for the logic fans out there. And what I mean by that is you say, oh, this guru is very successful. This is the path they followed. Therefore, if I follow this path, I will have success too. It doesn't work that way. And it doesn't work that way because there are a million other factors that are going to go into whether they're successful or not. And part of this, to be very candid with you, is time lapse. And what I mean by that is that it was easier to build an online business 5 years ago. It was easier still to build an online business 10 years ago. Now, there were different challenges. I mean, there were challenges with tech and with all those other things, but there was a lot less competition. And when there was less competition, you didn't have to be as good. And we could talk about this. Amy Porterfield, my friend, she talks about how, a while ago, like in the past, you could have a crappy course, but if you had good marketing, you could succeed. Or you could have a good course and crappy marketing and you could succeed. And that kind of makes sense. And the latter case I want to talk about, if you have a good product and you're one of the only people on the market with a product to solve that particular problem for your people, You don't need good marketing. Your marketing can suck. You say, oh, you want to lose weight? Hey, I can help you lose weight. And if no one has ever heard that claim before, they're going to say, okay, cool, I'm going to take it. And they're going to buy it from you. As more competition comes in the space, it gets harder and harder and harder. And so you can't simply say, oh, well, it worked for them, so it's definitely going to work for me. Because it could be that part of the reason it worked for them was that they were building their reputation as the person who is perfect at X, Y, and Z before there were competitors out there. And so they built up this reputation, and now they have that reputation, which helps them. And this is another concept I want you to get, which is that the launch models, the things that you see the people with, multiple 7- and 8-figure businesses that they're doing and is working, is not necessarily the business plan, the launches, the et cetera, that you should be using as, say, a 5- or 6-figure business. Because there are different advantages. There are different things and reasons why things work at different levels of your business. And again, you're going to hear that and say, man, this seems so complicated. And it is. But the other thing that I think you need to understand is that you don't hear about the people who have followed the advice and it has failed. Now, we all kind of know this happens, right? We hear testimonials, we hear case studies about people who followed these instructions and it worked for them, and great. You don't hear about the people who didn't. And when I think about this, I always think about there's this famous fraud. And I'm not saying people are committing fraud. They are not. Entrepreneurs are not committing fraud. But I always think of this. And I think about it with stock pickers and everything else, because it's not fraud, et cetera. But the best way to explain it is actually this fraudulent thing that happened a long time ago. And I say a long time ago. I don't remember when it happened, but there was this guy who said that he could pick the winners of every, that he could pick a guaranteed winner of football bets in the NFL. And it was like he was going to pick one game a week, and every single week he was going to pick the winner. And to make it complicated, I don't want to go over the concept of the spread, but just so you understand, he would basically be able to give you a bet where you could go and say, I'm going to bet $100 on this, and you would, win 200 if you were right, kind of thing. So it was this guaranteed thing. And I don't know how he got the name, or how he got your name, but you would get a letter from him that would actually pick that week's game. And he was right. And then week 2, you'd get another letter from him, and he'd pick the winner again. And week 3, you'd get another letter, and so on and so forth. And you would go through 10 weeks, and he picked every single game right. And then he would make an offer to you in that letter that would say, if you want the rest of my season's picks, here's what you have to pay me. And he would get you to pay him money to give you the picks the rest of the year. And people did it. People, paid him a bunch of money. And then his next picks didn't always win. And people were so confused about what was happening. And it's a logic game that you may have figured it out. But what happened was, and I'll just use some round numbers. Week 1, he started with 1 million letters he sent out. And 500,000 of them picked team 1, and 500,000 of them picked team 2. So he was picking against himself. And then if team 1 won, the next week he only sent letters to the 500,000 people who he had said correctly that he had sent letters saying that team 1 was going to be the winner. And so he did that over and over again each week, whittled it down. Now, by the end of the season, he didn't have 1 million people, but he was simply winnowing down the people based upon, taking both sides of every bet each and every week. And I think of that con every time I think of things, because that is actually literally fraud. It is con. He's making it seem like he is guaranteed wins every week. He doesn't tell you he's doing this thing, etc. And that's not what the gurus online are doing. And I'm not accusing gurus of fraud, so don't get mad at me and say that I'm doing that. I'm simply saying that the same kind of concept happens naturally, because if you think about it, it's not just the gurus who have survivor's bias, it's also their students. if the students of a program, let's say you have 50% succeed and 50% fail, guess what? Those 50% who fail probably didn't talk about it. And a lot of them actually, if you're in the online space, maybe quit trying to build an online business. They go and do something else. And so even when you're in the communities of these people, you're going to be around the people who've had success with whatever it is that person teaches. And I've seen it in community after community. And look, I can tell you, I talk about Amy Porterfield, I talk about James Wedmore, I talk about all these different mentors, and I recognize that there are people who have taken their programs and haven't had success. And there's a million different reasons for that. It could be that maybe they decided a course, like in Amy's case, a course was not what they were meant to build. It could have been that they didn't follow the advice. I don't know. But what I can tell you is I have no doubt that there are people who take every one of these step-by-step, courses, follow every single step, and don't succeed. It just is what it is. And it's true if someone is teaching you how to create a self-liquidating offer. It's true if someone is teaching you how to, build an Instagram following. It's true if you're doing all of these different things. I don't care what it is. There are people who can follow the directions. They're given a checklist, do these 8 things. They do those 8 things in order, and it doesn't work. Now, some of it might be they're not doing it right. I don't know, but I don't think that's it. The problem is also that there's not necessarily a right? It's you have to use some judgment at various steps of the way. For example, validating an idea for a product. You can validate it, but the problem is that's always going to be a bit of an amorphous thing unless you're being taught to validate by getting people to buy and pre-sell, which now has become the new trend. And again, I'm glad that that has become the trend. And my friend Amy Porterfield, that's now what she teaches in her digital course academy, is that you validate your course idea by pre-selling it before you make it, right? So you get people to buy and then you have some validation. But I just want you to understand that there are all of these things where you think about it and you say, well, validating, yeah, I can see how that's not always going to be an easy thing to say. Did I do it? Yes or no? It's not a task that you can simply say, check, done. That's not the way it works. So I hope that I've convinced you that the reality is that you simply can't look for an instruction manual. And you might be sitting here saying, great, Bobby, now you've got me sitting here depressed, not knowing, what to do, and in a existential crisis of are there no rules? Is there nothing I can do? And what I want to tell you is that there is, and I don't know that it's a rainbow, but I think it is. For entrepreneurs who are willing to do the work, this is a good thing. For entrepreneurs who are willing to actually build their business, put in the time, put in the effort, the fact that there is no simple step-by-step checklisted process or instruction manual is actually a good thing. Yes, it makes your life harder building that business. There is no question about that. But what it also does is it weeds out the people who aren't willing to do the work. Because being a successful online entrepreneur or entrepreneur generally isn't about going and finding a specific strategy or a specific tactic that is laid out in a step-by-step process, steps 1 through 10 or 1 through 57 or however many steps. Being a successful online entrepreneur or marketer or kind of anyone in building a business these days goes deeper than that. You have to be willing to dig in to understand the principles behind the tactic, behind the strategy, so that you don't simply see 8 steps. You see each step and understand why you're doing that and what it's meant to do and what the broader purpose, what the broader idea, and what the why is for that individual step. When you get there, all of a sudden things get easier. And the reason why is because when you understand those things, the why, the principle behind it, all of those things, what happens is you can actually it's like the Matrix. You're like Neo in the Matrix then. You start to see the ones and zeros. You start to see what is happening around you, what's going on, and how to respond to what is happening. And this doesn't mean that just knowing the why will mean that you'll follow the steps and it'll succeed. No, sometimes it means you follow the steps and it doesn't work. But you can figure out why it didn't work. And you can go back to the principles and you can say, okay, well, maybe this was not the right recipe for me. Maybe this was not the right instruction manual that I need because of X, Y, and Z. So it allows you to figure out what didn't work and why it didn't work, and then maybe something broader. But also, and here is the bigger thing I want you to get, when you know these principles, when you know the why, know the ideas behind it, it allows you to make a better selection of the instruction manual that you pick. Even though you're not going to be able to pick an instruction manual that's guaranteeing success, at least you will pick the one that will give you the best chance of success. In other words, and I'll talk about this a million times, there's a bunch of different ways, and I don't love launches, but if you're someone who believes in launches and is going to do a launch, you have a lot of options out there. You could do like an email-only launch, right? You could do that. You could do a traditional webinar launch, a webinar to a sales page. You could do like a short webinar to a sales call launch. You could do a challenge launch with, a 5-day challenge. You could do a 3-part video series launch using the product launch formula. You could do a combination like James Wedmore's come up with, where you kind of take the 3-part video series and a challenge and put them together. Or you could be crazy like James and do an 8-part video series, right? You could do a bunch of different options. But if you understand the principles, if you understand the why, if you understand what you're trying to do and what you need to do from kind of a marketing principles standpoint, you're going to be able to figure out which one of those launch styles works for your audience, for you, for your product, for your particular platform. And you're going to be able to get the best chance of success. And it could be that for you, given your industry, a challenge is the best thing to do. But you got to understand the why. You have to understand the currents going on underneath you to be able to make those decisions. The other thing, though, I want you to understand is that when you understand these basic principles, you're able to tweak the instructions for yourself to make it fit you. And here's where I'm going to use an actual recipe as an example. Let's say, you find a recipe that's fantastic for, I don't know, we'll just call it Hawaiian chicken. I don't even know. I'm just making something up literally on the spot here. And you love it, and it's a great recipe. But you have someone who's coming over who for some reason can't have one of the ingredients in that. Well, if you're someone who can only follow a recipe and doesn't understand kind of cooking and the concepts behind it and things like that, you're never going to be able to modify that recipe to take out the thing that person can't have without potentially ruining it. You're going to have to pick a different recipe. A recipe that maybe you don't like as much, that doesn't get you the best results. Now, if you're someone who is a good cook, who understands kind of the ideas behind cooking, maybe you're able to say, oh, well, I can delete this ingredient that this person is allergic to, and I can substitute this other thing, and it will serve the same purpose. And I use this as an example. There's all kinds of examples of this, like there's gluten-free cooking and baking and things like that, or there's dairy-free and all of these things where people now, of course, there are, people who can help you with that, right? Who can help you with those very specific things. But it's a broader concept that I want you to get, that when you understand the why, in a sense, if you kind of understand the chemistry of what's happening in your marketing, you're able to take the instruction manual you get from someone and say, well, okay, I get these 8 steps, but this step 5 is not going to work as they described it for my audience because of X, Y, and Z. But what I can do is I can swap out a different step 5 that will actually work and serves the same purpose. And you see, that's when you're able to actually start to feel confident that you can take instruction manuals you get, modify them to your business, modify them to your offer, and modify them to your audience and have it succeed. That's why these days I can create a webinar quickly and I don't have to follow an exact slide-by-slide guidance from someone. Now, when I first was learning, and I learned from Amy Porterfield, and I talked about this in last week's episode, I followed her guidance, I followed her framework, but now I don't do that necessarily because I understand what I'm trying to do. Now, I take the general framework, but it becomes a loose set of instructions that I'm able to follow, that I'm able to actually implement based upon what I want to do because I understand the principles behind what I'm doing. And so again, I want to stress to you that the fact that there is no instruction manual that I can give you that will guarantee you success shouldn't be something that makes you say, okay, I'm done, I quit, I give up. And if it is, well, that's okay. But maybe it's a sign that being an entrepreneur isn't kind of your path. Because if you want to, hey, all I've got to do is follow the rules and I will get paid type of situation, that's what a job is. Being an entrepreneur is not like that. Being an entrepreneur, it's personal development on steroids. It's trying things that don't work. It is not a matter of I simply check boxes and I'm going to succeed. You got to go deeper. And a lot of the frustration that I see coming from people in the online space is, but I followed the steps they told me and it didn't work. And I say, yeah, that's true. And that's going to happen. And what it means is for the entrepreneurs who are willing to do the work, and by the work, I don't mean simply following instructions. I mean doing the deep work, understanding what we're doing, taking the time to understand things like messaging, to understand things like branding, to understand things like connection marketing, to understand things like funnels, to understand things like direct response marketing, and to understand niching and frameworks and all of these different ideas that are out there, and to kind of put them together in a very meaningful way, and to be a little bit less rigid. There is an upside for us, because for us, we're able to actually cut through the noise, to cut through the clutter, because most people aren't willing to do that work. And so I'm telling you, I'm here because I'm weird. I don't, blow smoke up people's asses and tell them that it's all sunshine and rainbows here. It's not. Being an entrepreneur is hard, and that's a good thing. So quit looking for instruction manuals. Start understanding the principles behind marketing. You can figure out what that means for you. Does it mean that you just spend time learning on a regular basis, that you spend time educating yourself, that you spend time like looking and going deeper? But you need to be doing that on a regular basis. It can't simply be, I'm going to be doing, and implementing strategies and tactics, because the problem is maybe you'll succeed, but you won't know what worked and why it worked, and all of a sudden it'll stop working and you can't fix it. Or maybe you're just going to fail because you're just going from, one set of instructions to another. So take the time to do the work, and then you're able to actually build the business of your dreams. Talk to you later. That's it for this episode of the Certified Badass Online Marketing Podcast. Make sure to tune in next time. And in the meantime, Go out and build the badass business of your dreams.